When big insects eat small insects, and several articles concerning Sino-Indian, Indo-Tibetan issues, defense and strategic matters. Now, among other things, he is also the director of the Tibetan Pavilion at Oroville, which was inaugurated by His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself in 2009. So today we have the benefit of his authoritative voice on our topic, which is the future of Tibet, a new front in a Cold War. So welcome, Mr. Arpi. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I have an echo, so I'll just move my mobile phone away. Okay. So, sir,
we had a power cut just now, but there is still some light. So
okay.
We are on the UPS.
Okay, I see. So, sir, before we enter into the question of the topic itself, the question pertains to, of course, Tibet's future, as in looking in the future. But to understand the future, we have to get to the past. This is for the benefit of us students, since Tibet has not been in the popular discourse, so it has been in the strategic discourse for quite some time. So can you describe briefly the Indian reversal of the British Raj's Tibet policy and the events between 1947 to 1962, which gives rise to the Tibet issue of this day? Was this something motivated on part of India, or was it something caused by a sense of delusion, or was it a political choice which was misinformed?
Thank you for inviting me first. There is some echo in your voice, so I'm not sure
I'm trying to see why this is.
And I think the other also got echo in your voice. So I'm not sure that I got the question properly, but you asked about the situation between 1947 and 1952. Is it?
Yes. So my question is 1947 and 1962. So why did it change its old British Raj Tibet policy? Why did India change its Tibet policy? The British Raj's Tibet policy. What transpired between 47 and 62?
I think it was one of the greatest tragedy that India had to go through after independence. Because India became independent in 47, 15 of August, and China founded the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949. So for these two first years, Tibet remained an independent like it had been since 1910 or 1911. The British always wrote in the file, Tibet is a de facto independent country. And it was confirmed even in 1949 in the House of Commons in London by the British parliamentarian. So Tibet was de facto independent, its own flag, its own currency, its own language, and moreover its own foreign bureau, which was corresponding to the Ministry of External Affairs. So usually when you run your own external affair, you're an independent country. But Mao Zedong, after taking over on October 1st, 49, very quickly moved his pawns. First, the months later, 1 or 2 months later, he took over Eastern Turkestan, who became Xinjiang, the new dominion. And that was a very strategic move, and India didn't realize because all the gates of Ladakh, Kashmir were suddenly open. You know, for centuries and centuries, India had traded with Tibet via Demchok, for example, to Western Tibet and Lhasa, or also to Eastern Turkestan and Central Asia via the Karakoram Pass. And suddenly, by Mao Zedong taking over Xinjiang, Eastern Turkestan, suddenly the stakes were changed, and India changed its neighbor from a very peaceful neighbor, Eastern Turkestan, and Tibet even more peaceful because it was a Buddhist country. Suddenly, India had communist countries. So that move of Mao Zedong in November, December 1949 really changed everything for India. But India didn't realize. Moreover, 1 year later, in October of 1950, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the so-called Liberation Army, liberated Tibet, in words of Mao Zedong, and entered in eastern Tibet and took over Chamdo. There was a small Tibetan army. They fought well. They were good soldiers, but they were not trained as a soldier. They don't have, for example, they used to take their own family following behind them and like that. So they were not ready to take on the Mao Zedong's troop who had fought in against nationalists in China and against the Japanese. They were in 10 days they were crushed, and Chamdo was so-called liberated, and that was the end of Tibet, of a free Tibet. Now India lost a lot. India lost the border first, and few officers in the government of India and many politicians also saw what was happening. Thus, you all know about this letter of Sardar Patel on November 7, 1950, which is just 1 month after the fall of Chamdo. Many politicians, I said, were supporting Sardar Patel. They were first Rajendra Prasad, the president. He was president since January 26 of 1950. But also other politicians like Rajaji or K.M. Munshi. And there was also diplomats like Sir Girja Shankar Bajpai, who was the Secretary General of the Ministry of External Affairs. At that time, there was a foreign secretary, a Commonwealth secretary, and above there was the general secretary. So Bajpai, in fact, drafted the letter for Patel to send to Nehru. One of the tragedy, I don't know if you call it karma, maybe in India, or I don't know what it is, but Sardar Patel passed away on 15th of December. So with Sardar Patel gone, all those politicians like Rajendra Prasad and others who were ready to fight to keep Tibet independent and to keep that border safe as it has been for centuries, that was over, that fight was over, and Nehru prevailed. And with his ambassador in Beijing, Sardar P.M. Panikkar, he imposed his views, which was that he sincerely believed that friendship with China would save in Asia and would save a third world war. So if you look in all these dispatches, these cables, these telegrams between Lhasa, Gangtok, and the South Block in Delhi, that is the primary objective of the government of India from 1950-51 to 1954. But I should mention a small, not a detail, but because today we realize how important it was. The Patel, before passing away on 15th of December 1950, created a committee called the Ima Singhji Committee. General Ima Singhji was the Deputy Defense Minister. And interestingly, he took people from the Army, from the Air Force, from the Intelligence Bureau, from the Ministry of External Affairs, of course, and from about 7, 8 members who went to the border. That was in January 1950, 1951. and they gave a report. And they decided on the basis of this report to send Major Bob Ketting and 200 of the Assam Rifle to take over Tawang. Now in 1914, you know that during the Shimla Convention, the Indian government, Sir Henry McMahon was the Foreign Secretary of India, and Lochan Jatra, the Tibetan Prime Minister, signed, agreed on the border and signed on the map, on actually two maps, and fixed their seal and agree on that line, which is still known the McMahon line. Now, based on that, the Bob Ketting, signed by the governor of Assam, Dalai Lama, occupied Tawang. Now we understand. So many years, we celebrated a couple of months ago the 70 years of Bob Ketting taking over the administration of Tawang, but we understand the importance of that move. The Prime Minister was not informed. He discovered the day after Bob Ketting reached Tawang. He was very upset because they said, you people don't understand the larger implication and my policy of having friendship with China. But later on, to be fair with Nehru, he recognized that it was a very great move and that India was right to do it. So this continued to develop, and it went up to 1954 when Nehru thought that the de facto occupation of Tibet by the communist China should be also enshrined in a treaty. So that there was 4 months of negotiation, and then that eventually became the Panchil Agreement. But the interesting point, the tragic point, I should say retrospectively, is that the border was not negotiated. No word of the border was during these 4 months. Nobody spoke of the border. The Indian negotiator had ordered not to bring the topic first. They said if China has a problem, they will raise the issue. They never raised. And the day the agreement, that famous Panchil agreement, because of the 5 principles which are embedded as a preamble of the agreement, no border was mentioned, and Chu Enlai said that all the issues which were ripe for settlement have been settled. That was tragic because India would discover 2-3 months later, when the first incursion in Baravati, in the central sector near Niti village, were intruded by the Chinese troops. And it was beginning of June 1954. So it took only 2 months for the Chinese to start moving on. And from there onwards, they moved. And by that time, 54, they started the road on the across the Aksai on the Indian territory. And India pretended not to know about it. It's only in 1958 when there was a clash in the hot spring, which is one of the 4 spots where there is a confrontation today. That hot spring is not solved, by the way, even if the fingers on Pangong Lake have been solved in inverted comma. The 3 other places, Galhan, Hot Spring, and Depsang, have not been solved. So in 58, there was the first clash in Hot Spring, and India had to admit that there was a problem, that China had done a road on its territory. In Tibet, once the agreement was signed, all the situation started deteriorating. All the advantages that India had, like India had 12 very beautiful dark bungalows for the postal services, all the way from Gangtok, Chumbi Valley to Lhasa. So all these were taken over by China. It was part of the Panchil Agreement. The telegram office was also taken by China. And slowly the 3 trade agencies in Tibet, which were located in Yatong, in the Chumbi Valley, very close to Sikkim, in Gyantse, midway between the border and Lhasa, and very importantly in Gartok, which is Western Tibet, was controlling all the trade between India and Tibet. And this trade was extensive. Today you read in a newspaper that many of the villages, hundreds, I think 600-700 villages in Uttarakhand have been like dead village, phantom village. They are empty of all inhabitants. All these villages were living by the trade, through the trade with Tibet. Each of these community or big villages or tahsil in Uttarakhand, that was not Uttarakhand, that was part of UP at that time, but they had their own trademark in Tibet. So this was closed. By 1960 already everything was closed. By that time, Dalai Lama had taken refuge in India, and very soon after he crossed over the border in Tawang sector in Kenzemane on the 31st of March 1959, the border clashes started. The Longzhou incident took place on 25th of August 1959, and Longzhou was unfortunately in the news last month because China has built a village, a so-called model village in Longzhou on what India considers its own territory. So that was the end of centuries of presence in Tibet, of trade, of pilgrimage. You know, before the 1954 agreement, Indian pilgrims and thousands every year would walk to Kailash, Mansarovar for the yatra. There had no Aadhaar card at that time. There had no paper. There had no certificate of identity. They could walk freely via many of the passes, either in Himachal, like Tripkila, in Uttarakhand, Niti, Mana, Dharma, Lipurdek, and also some via Sikkim, Natula, or Jalepla. So that was a big tragedy that I tried to document in my books, 4 books, because I feel that China is trying constantly to change the narrative and to tell the world that they have been always in Tibet, that Tibet belongs to them, and that actually through the Panchil was a very clever move from Chu Enlai and from the Chinese, because they said that no interference on the other's territory or on the other's affair. That was the first point of the 5 principles. Now, if you look at that stopped India, because once India had accepted that it was Tibet belonged to China, India couldn't do anything or interfere or do anything in Tibet.
But Mr. Arpi, it seems that we have continued with this folly to this 2003 joint declaration as well. So what exactly is Tibet under international law? Like, what is the meaning of this word, that the Chinese have suzerainty and not sovereignty in Tibet? And secondly, if India accepts China as the sovereign in Tibet, then why do we host the government in exile, the Dalai Lama, and continue to call it Indo-Tibetan border? So is it our policy of ambiguity? Do you think it can actually change? I mean, from our side?
The ambiguity started in 1950 and in 1954. Legally, the issue was taken in the UN by Tibet in November 1950. And at that time, it came to the General Assembly and to a committee, and India intervened. India's representative in the UN intervened, said, we will solve amicably the issue, so let's drop it, let's keep it pending. And very interestingly, one Canadian scholar, Claude Johnston, she is no more, but she discovered about 15, 20 years ago that issue is still pending in the UN. But who is going to take again this issue? At that time in 1950, it's El Salvador who supported the Tibetan resolution and who pushed that for the issue to be discussed. But today, very few people want to oppose China. China has become much more powerful. But legally, if we will go into the legality of the issue, Tibet had all the attributes of an independent state. And if an independent state, according to the UN rules, I mean, laws, if an independent state is attacked militarily by another, the UN has right to intervene. But now everybody has been quiet in 1950, in 54, and in 59 when the Dalai Lama came. So there's no, even though legally Tibet has a point, there was a court of jurists in 1959, and they very clearly that say that Tibet was independent, but who cares? If you take the South China Sea today, the La Hague Tribunal say that China's claims are not valid legally, but who is going to oppose it, no? Except if you send your aircraft carrier and everything. But in the case of Tibet, who is going to send any troops or anything? I don't know if it's answering you.
No, but I mean, trespass does not give title. So, I mean,
there is a very, very big echo in your voice.
yes, I know, but I don't know what to do actually. Let me try switching off the fan. Just a moment. Is it better? No.
I think slightly. Yeah.
So my cross question was about Vajpayee 2003 declaration. So what is the 2003 Sino-Indian declaration, joint declaration? So does it materially alter anything?
Vajpayee's visit.
No, Vajpayee's joint declaration. 2003.
I think that was a goof up from then when they accepted that they changed Tibet by a Tibetan autonomous region. That's, you see, I've seen people, I've discussed with some of the people before they went in 2003 to Beijing, and they wanted absolutely to find a compromise or to have a solution or to be friends with China. In India, there's happened so many times that the Indian diplomacy wants to find a solution. So sometimes you close your eyes on some realities which are not good. Incidentally, I think that during the confrontation in Ladakh, that was very good that the Indian army was the main negotiator. Of course, after the sixth round of talk, there were the Joint Secretary of East Asia was also part of it. But it's always good that this sort of negotiation, China is much more far smarter than India in negotiating. So at that time in 2003, I think they did a blunder because they wanted Sikkim to be recognized by China. So as a compromise, they offered that. It happens very often, like if you take in 1993, the agreement with China, and 96, they speak about a LAC. Now, that LAC has never been defined. You are lawyers, you know better than me. When you draft a law or bill, if you use some terms, you have to define these terms. So in that case, in 93, LAC should have been defined. But I was told the Prime Minister wanted absolutely to have signed something with China. So they said, we will discuss or we will settle the LAC after, we will prepare a map after. As a result, today, 93 means 27 years ago, 28 years, still there's no map of the LAC. They say China has shown some map of the LAC in 2002 for 20 minutes. No, for the central sector, there China is given. So there is a map of the LAC. We know what are their IB claim and their LAC claim. In the western sector, in Ladakh, where the confrontation is taking place, there is no exchange of maps. So, and that was done, that the lack of the definition of what is mentioned in that agreement was done because the Prime Minister wanted to hurry up and sign during the visit in 96. It was Jiang Zemin coming to India. So it has very often occurred, that same mistake. Hopefully, I think today things have changed, and I find it good again that army also is involved because they know the meaning of what is 100 meter, 200 meter in a mountainous area. If you take the case of Galwan, their map, Chu Enlai in December 62 had sent a letter to the head of the states of Asia and Africa, and he attached a small map. But you can see very clearly Galwan or Hot Spring, which is the claim of as LAC of China. Now they wanted to move in May 2020 a few hundred meters to have a better position. Only army would know this sort of detail, because when you're sitting in South Block, it's very difficult. So all these blunders which have been done, like in 1954, I mentioned these 4 months of talks, nobody from the intelligence bureau, nobody from army, nobody from other agency were involved. Only it was left with diplomats. That was, I think, a mistake. And today it looks like it has been rectified. Let's hope it continues. It should be more holistic, and everyone who has a stake in this issue, whether it's the intelligence agency, the army, the air force, or whoever, and of course the South Bloc is the main interlocutor, but it should take into account all these things. Otherwise, you will have again and again the same issue coming up. Because China is very smart.
So, I mean, yes, you wanted to say something, madam? I can't hear you. Please switch on your mic. Rahul, can you please switch Tanya's mic? So, madam, why don't you put your question in the chat box here? Your question or your comment in the chat box. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. So, Rahul, any questions that you might have, please put it in the chat box. Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about India's hard interest into Tibet. I mean, inside Tibet, not the border. Say, for example, there's plans to build a dam on Brahmaputra. Then there's Himalayan Quad initiative. So, does India have any soft options here? I mean, by soft options, I mean options that does not include challenging their ownership of Tibet.
I think India is very far from that, but India has a serious problem in the border and with Tibet. because China has undertaken these huge projects, these mega projects. You mentioned the Brahmaputra. Well, Brahmaputra, I think the press is taking not very seriously, I find, because if it's 3 times the size of the, oops, something has disappeared. If it's 3 times the size of the Three Gorges Dam, it will have a very serious implication for Arunachal, for Assam, as well as for Bangladesh. China is also doing huge project, which is, everyone thought it was impossible. They will do a train between Sichuan and Lhasa. The first section will be completed in June of 2021. It will be between Ningchi, north of Arunachal, and Lhasa. Now, this portion, for example, this first portion, has 70% of the these 400 kilometers, which is either tunnel or bridges. So that shows how good China is at doing this thing. Another big issue which is coming up, it has not come up in the press so far, but China is doing a second road linking Xinjiang to Tibet. I mentioned the Aksashin Road, which was started in 52, 53, 54, but also now they will have another road which has a lot of strategic implication. That road is much more on the west, and it will eventually end up at Kirong, which is the border with Nepal. And we know that China is planning also a railway line between Kirong and Kathmandu, and eventually between Kathmandu and Lumbini. This is not decided. But so it has huge strategic implication for India. And China also has discovered the largest zinc mines in China. They are located inside the Aksashin. Now it's considered by India as its own territory. So I don't know how the India would react to that, or officially. Very often we are not told, the public is not told what is discussed in this meeting. Yesterday there was the 21st meeting of the working mechanism for consultation and coordination between the additional secretary in OMEA who looks after East Asia and his counterpart in China. I think they're using the same formula each time when they publish their communique. It's so vague that you can't understand anything, but it will be the same for the 22nd meeting or the 23rd meeting. I don't know what is discussed. I hope that these issues are discussed because they have a lot of strategic implication, particularly for the Brahmaputra. The Yalong Sampo is the most fragile area maybe of Asia. It's also a very sacred place. But in 1950, on August 15th, for the third Independence Day of India, there was the largest, most powerful earthquake of the century, 8.6 on the Richter scale. The Brahmaputra changed its course. The people, His Holiness Dalai Lama said that he was 15 years old from Lhasa. He saw the sky completely red. So that's the area where China is going to do a cascade of 9 hydropower plants, cutting across the grid band of the Yalong Tsampo. And this area is extremely fragile. We have seen what has happened in Chamoli 2 months back. We could call it a mini hydropower, the one which is being done in Chamoli, if you compare to what China is going to do. So it's not only is going to destroy that beautiful part of Tibet where 60% of the reserve, the biological reserve of Tibet is kept there, but also is going to create havoc downstream. And downstream is what? Is Arunachal, it's Assam, it's Bangladesh. So I hope that this issue is taken very seriously, because I don't even know if China today needs all this electricity. Why do they need 60 giga of electricity for Tibet? Certainly not. So that's a big issue to be discussed. And another issue that I should mention also is these villages, the change of demography on the border. I think China today is nervous about the Tibetan population on the border.
Actually, I will come back to this question later.
Okay.
I have a series of questions on that.
Okay.
So let's move on to the Western role in Tibet. The Americans have tacitly supported the 59 uprising, but thereafter they have not given any direct support. In 2002, they had the Tibetan Policy and Support Act. So I have a series of questions on why this time. The first question, do I read the BP essay, which gives the election of Dalai Lama to Tibetan Buddhists as a kind of tacit acceptance of Tibetan autonomy? This is because the Dalai Lama is actually very closely connected to the Tibetan state. It's not a mere religious head.
Can you type your question, because I have heard not everything, so because of the echo, you don't mind typing just.
So my question is, does the TP say basically acknowledge Tibetan autonomy?
The Dalai Lama is asking only for autonomy. That is your question.
No. Tibetan Policy and Support Act, the American legislation, does it tacitly accept Tibetan autonomy?
But what means Tibetan autonomy today? You've seen what happened last week, this week, yesterday, the day before, in the NPC, the National People's Congress. All the deputies, they assemble every year in March, and they vote certain laws. The laws are prepared in advance by the Communist Party, and they have no choice. You get 90.9%. Now, what they have passed, they have changed totally the status of Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong was promised that there would be one party, two system. Now, today, it's the end of that one party, two system. So, in my views, what can the Tibetan expect from China? What type of autonomy? I think it's utopic today to dream of autonomy, because that particular regime, that totalitarian regime, will not give any autonomy to Tibet. Because one of the reasons, if they would give autonomy to Tibet, they would have to give to Xinjiang. And Tibetan are Buddhists, they are peaceful people. Their leader has taught them non-violence. It would be relatively, if they impose something, it would be relatively peaceful. It might not be the same in Xinjiang. So whatever would be given to Tibet, immediately Xinjiang would ask for it. Hong Kong, who is losing slowly its autonomy, would ask. And what about Inner Mongolia? Today in Inner Mongolia, the local people, they can't speak their own language. It's not taught in the schools, and there was some demonstration and riots. So it's very difficult to envisage under the present regime genuine autonomy like the Dalai Lama has asked for. I can't see it. I think maybe Dalai Lama has a vision for after 20, 30 years. I don't know. Maybe there will be some change in the regime, hopefully, that China would become, I would say, a normal state like Taiwan. You know, it's not the question of Chinese people. If you look at the Taiwanese, most of the countries have good relations, culturally, sociologically. At every level, you can have a good relation with Chinese people. But that particular regime was trying to impose its views on not only on the minorities. If you look what China called minorities, it's 2/3 of the landmass of the People's Republic of China. If you add Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, you get two-thirds of the. So I don't see in the near future any genuine autonomy as the Dalai Lama would like actually.
No. So even if the Americans accept it, then at least the hope remains alive. At least in the international way. I mean, even if nationally they can do whatever they want, but at least the world does not go along with them. So will TBSA have that effect? Can it?
I think Dalai Lama always spoke about the determination of the Tibetan people. It's very difficult to know what the Tibetan inside Tibet feel or think, because they have to work with the system, they have to deal with the system. It is true that in 1987, when the Dalai Lama went to Washington, D.C., and proposed his 5-point peace plan, the West told him clearly, if you renounce independence, we will support you. Because America or Europe or UK or France or Germany, nobody was ready to support him if he asked full independence. So I think, I would not call it a deal, but the fact that he agreed on his own in 87 and later on in Strasbourg, when he gave his Strasbourg declaration in April 88, he agreed to drop independence and just stick to genuine autonomy. So that was probably the condition for the West to support him. So in one way, it remains alive. Like if he would ask for independence today, maybe he would have not got the legislation passed in the US. But on practical terms, it doesn't change anything inside Tibet, no? The monitoring of the people has intensified so much. The sophistication of the monitoring, there's no comparison from the 87 or 89 Tiananmen Square, where people could fax their friends, whether in Tibet or in mainland China, what was happening on the square. But today, it's impossible to send a tweet without being caught few seconds later. The extensive machinery, including the facial recognition. Now in China, you don't need a SIM card on your credit card, or you just need facial recognition. They say that in a stadium of 50,000, they can recognize anybody anytime. Not only that, they have this social credit system where everything is being entered. Now they have introduced 2 or 3 weeks ago special health passport. So all your health history will be entered, and it will be also brought with other data on your personal life. And the monitoring in Xinjiang or Tibet is so extensive that if some person, instead of coming through the front door of his house, go through the back door, it will be noticed by the artificial intelligence, and it will trigger a higher level of surveillance of that particular person. So where is the autonomy today in China? Whether it's in a minority area in Tibet, Xinjiang, or in Mongolia, or in the mainland. And I'm afraid that the way it goes, that in Hong Kong also, it will be more and more difficult for people to live. They're risking to lose their business. So on one side, you have the America passing legislation which are good. And but on the other side, the system is becoming more and more difficult. I'm thinking particularly of the border population. You see, President Xi Jinping is speaking of the BRI, the Border and Road Initiative, especially with Pakistan. They have that China-Pakistan economic corridor, where billions of dollars are invested, maybe vested, not, but they are given to Pakistan. But Xi Jinping wants to have this border road initiative to spread in Central Asia and eventually in Europe. But if you look at the border between India and Tibet, that border that in 1950s, I mentioned it earlier, was fully open. You didn't need a passport. The traders could go anytime, go to Tibet, trade with their goods. When their goods were not, in one season where the goods were not sold, they could leave them with their Tibetan friends and come back the next season. Now there's not a single, no, it's wrong to say there's not a single port. There's 3 ports, land port, one in Lipuklek, one in Chipkila, and one in Natula. But the trade is so minimal. And for example, a trader coming from Chumbi Valley, coming to via Natula for official trade, he has his own permit for trading. And Sikkimes who want to go to Chumbi Valley to trade have also their own permit, but they are not allowed to speak to each other. Same thing in Chipkila. People coming from Western Tibet coming to that Himachal are not allowed to. China doesn't want, China fears that the local population could betray them, which is true, that if the Dalai Lama would say a word, that could trigger unrest like in 2008 in Tibet. Though I don't think Dalai Lama was involved in at that time in 2008 in this unrest in Tibet, but it spread like wildfire in not only in central Tibet. It started in Lhasa, but it started in eastern Tibet, in Kham and Amdo province of China.
Do you think that in the West, now there is a general skepticism about the whole concept of open China? You take the Uber Human Rights Act, then you have the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, and you have the Tibetan Policy Act. So do you think the West is now beginning to see China as an empire that it truly is?
I think yes, because otherwise we would not be speaking today. There is a general skepticism. Some survey has been done in the West that shows that China cannot be trusted. And in most countries, I think everything has changed 1 year back. It coincided, or maybe it was triggered by the Wuhan Chinese virus. Everyone knows that virus, 90% it's originated in that P4 lab, which was financed by France. And France was kicked out in 2017 from that project, and China was left on its own. Interestingly, in January of 2020, when the world didn't know yet about the virus, when Chinese general from the PLA, General Chen Hui, she's a lady, she took over that lab. How can a civilian lab is being taken over by the PLA? So that shows that there was something fishy, and that was not inquired into by the WHO. So generally there's skepticism. It has changed tremendously also in India with the confrontation in Ladakh. Now the government has started taking serious decision, first for the old TikTok and all the apps, but now it's going much further. And last week, the 5G also, it will be much more difficult for China. But generally, there's two things. that you have to see. One is the public. From the public side, there's more than skepticism. And you have so many now articles or debate on Tibet and about one China policy, asking why that one China policy? Why should we be imposed? 1 year back, it was different because when China would start barking, shouting, everyone would be scared. You know that they have these diplomats called the wolf warrior, and they would start shouting. Everyone would keep quiet. Everyone said, if we say anything, we will lose business. That is change. That is change, and many countries now standing up to China, UK, Australia. For India, it's much more difficult to take on frontally or to answer the same way that they speak, these diplomats. Because India has 4,056 kilometers of border. Out of it, 3,480 are the LAC with China. So that LAC is not a dormant border. Today we have a confrontation in Ladakh, but tomorrow we can have a confrontation in Baravati or a few other places in central sector or in northern Sikkim. We have seen in Nakula several times since 1 year, Chinese have tried to intrude in India's territory in one place where the principle of watershed is absolutely clear, and in one place where legally in 1890 there was a treaty between British India and the Manchu Empire delineating that border. So it's one place where you cannot have thinking of two watersheds or two. That's the range is absolutely clear. Despite this, twice China in 1 year entered Nakula. And tomorrow you can have an issue in Uttar Subansari, in Azafila or Taksin area. You have in Longzhou already, they have built a village. You can have in Samdorongchu in the north of Tawang, or you can have in a few other places which are so-called disputed. And I don't see that in the near future China will agree to give its own map of what they perceive as LAC. So as long as no map, the border will remain hot. So skepticism is there from the general public, is there from the media. I don't know. I hope it's also there from the government side. I think so, because if you look at some of the decisions taken, it is there.
So actually, I was talking in terms of the West. So why I am raising this is it seems like a prelude to the Helsinki award, the Helsinki Agreement. So you had this Western governments ultimately questioning the existence of the Soviet system itself, and thereafter the things that happened ultimately led to fall of the Soviet Union. Tanya here is commenting is that it is a totalitarian imperialism. It's actually much worse than anything that has preceded it in history. Can you hear me, Mr. Arpi? So my question is, do you think that the West is seeing China the same way it saw Soviet presence in Eastern Europe as a kind of occupation?
You see, whole empire have come up, have grown, have dominated others, and one day have collapsed. So it's like a human body. One day you're born, you grow up, and one day you die. If recently I was using for a presentation a video showing the history of Asia on 2000 years, how every small empire has built and disappeared and changing. So it's really fascinating, this video, because you see everything changing. So there's no question that one day China will change also. And when you see this type of video, you see that the border of India have changed. And they were more or less fixed by the British, but they were not, when the British fixed the border in 1914, particularly, or even earlier in Ladakh area, in the concession, in British India had a good neighbor, Tibet, or Eastern Turkestan. Now, they didn't go into the details. If you take the Magma line, it's very vague. Sometimes it doesn't follow properly because that line didn't go in the detail. In any case, at that time, they didn't have the survey, the way that with a satellite that we can survey an area and really define where is the watershed. So if you take all this into consideration, this border of India were done by the British Empire, which doesn't exist today anymore, but they were done just to put a line, but not to go into detail, not thinking that Tibet would be invaded by China. Actually, I found when I was working on another book, very good report from the Chief of Staff in England in 1946, and they made a line between, which goes north of Lhasa, between Chamdo, one place called Nakchu, and Nari in western Tibet, and Leh. And they say if the Russian or the Chinese cross this line, we will intervene militarily. So there was a lot of discussion, how many squadrons they need, and all. But at that time, they thought that also the Russians could intervene. That was in 46, 47. So the neighbors changed. Chinese empire, especially the way today that totalitarian regime is controlling its own people. Who are the sufferer? It's the Chinese people first, who come under that credit system. Every thing you do, it gives a positive or a negative credit. So I'm saying that Chinese people are the first sufferer, and of course, what is the minority today in China means the Tibetan, the Mongol, or the Uyghur are suffering much more because they are discriminated. Now, there was the National People's Congress, I mentioned it. There's 300 delegates from the People's Liberation Army. They have 3 Tibetans. Tibetans are youngsters of 25, they are a second lieutenant. So Tibetans have no say in the army, but they have no say in the government. Now, since 1957, when Dalai Lama left Tibet and they installed their own rule, there's not a single Tibetan first secretary in Tibet. The first secretary is the boss in any province or autonomous region. So they've been always hand. So there's discrimination, and this discrimination, I'm sure that one day it will explode, and the Chinese emperor hopefully will evolve. But if it's not able to evolve, it will have revolution like in the past in China. I don't think US will be involved in any war with Tibet.
The US component against China is focused on Sea and Southeast Asia. So what is its component in Inner Asia?
I think the Quad, I mean, the Quad is not dealing with inner Asia. I think Quad is good thing is one more, which is something which is helping to put pressure on China. Now more pressure needs to be put on China. Quad is not involved because Quad has its own problem. I don't know how far they will go concretely to do something together. The four leaders have decided certain things a couple of days back. Let's see how it will be implemented, but they will not touch touchy issues like Tibet. And America is voted a legislation which is good, but as I mentioned earlier, the US have no border with China, so it's easier. They have also, of course, stakes in the South China Sea, but when you have a hot border like it happened in Ladakh, 50,000 Javan and officer facing 50,000 PLA, that's a different issue. So India cannot act like the American, and American, they can act also more bravely, I would say, or taking very strong decision, or their spokesperson speaking very strongly, for example, in favor of the Dalai Lama deciding its own successor. For India, it's more difficult, though I think India could do something in that case. Without having a legislation, India could certainly say from the Ministry of External Affairs, whatever the Dalai Lama decide, whether it decides to reincarnate or if it decides to select emanation, one boy already 10 or 15 years old, and train him as a next Dalai Lama. Whatever Dalai Lama decide, India could say and should say, we will support him and we will recognize that 15th Dalai Lama as the true Dalai Lama. That would make a difference. Now it's up to the Dalai Lama to announce what he wants to do. He said in 2-3 years' time he will do that. But without having a legislation or hurting China, India could do many things. This hurting China, I think it's a joke, because China said, oh, you're hurting our core interests, you're hurting us, you're hurting. But what about the 1.2 million Tibetans who got killed between 59? They should be hurt also. And India should be hurt also that all border has become very volatile and very dangerous. India should be hurt that China is doing 9 aeroport plants in the Great Band of the Yalong-Tsangpo. So India, my point is India should not bother by what China says. India should do what is its own interest, should do it in a friendly manner, but very firm manner, like it was done in Chushul in Moldova during the 10 rounds of negotiation. We have our own interests, we defend our own interests. We don't shout at you, but we will not move from our own interests. I think it's the way it should be done.
So about the succession of the Dalai Lama, how do you think this is going to play out?
And
Succession to Dalai Lama.
yes.
So how do you think that this is going to look like? Will India just accept his choice, or will we go by the Chinese choice? Like what has happened to the Panchen Lama? They have just imposed their will on him.
India should go by, first of all, India is a secular state. As you know, in the constitution, India is a secular state. So India should not say, we want you to take a new Dalai Lama from Ladakh or from Tawang. India should leave it to the Dalai Lama to decide, but India should stand behind the Dalai Lama, whatever his choice is. And I hope that his choice will be taken soon, and India should very clearly. About Dalai Lama born in China, why should India support such a move, knowing that the Dalai Lama very clearly said several times that he will not be reborn in occupied China. So about the Panchen Lama, it's more difficult because India has not said anything when that Panchen Lama was arrested in 1995. Now it's 25 years that boy has been under house arrest, and we don't know if he's still alive or not. Some of the foreign diplomats have said that they have asked, and repeatedly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China has said, no, no, don't worry, that boy doesn't want to come in the limelight, and he is doing well, he's doing his studies. But China should give proof that this boy is alive. Of course, the other one is going around. He participated in the, 2 meetings last week, and day before Thursday, he gave 2-3 interviews to the Chinese media in Xinhua news agency. And in particularly for the religion, he said something very strange. He said that Tibetan Buddhism has come from China. So Nalanda, which is the source of the Tibetan Buddhism, all the great gurus, the abbots of Nalanda went to Tibet, like Shankaracharya, and also Guru Padmasambhava came from Swat, Pandit Atisha came from Bengal. They went to propagate Buddhism. It's very strange to say that this tradition belongs to China. And that Chinese Panchen Lama also said the Buddhists should first follow the party, then follow the country, then follow the people, then follow Buddhism. That's look as a joke, but unfortunately it's not a joke. So, but how long this can last is really a big question, because I don't think people are fooled. But what choice do they have today in the particular system to speak? If they send, now they can't even communicate with their family in India. This WeChat has been banned by the government of India, but that makes it very difficult for them to, and of course, if they want a job, they have to follow this principle which have been enunciated by the Panchen Lama, the Chinese Panchen Lama. First follow the party, first follow Xi Jinping, then follow the party, then follow what China wants. So they are in extremely difficult situation, the people in Tibet. So I don't know what is the future, but certainly it will not last forever. It cannot last forever because human spirit, you can suppress it for some time, but not forever.
So, no, I am really concerned that someday Xi Jinping would be declared as an avatar of Buddha or some kind of Jesus Christ.
This is done now. Many pictures have circulated on the social media when instead of the altar where Buddha was put, because of course the Dalai Lama since last 20, 30, I think after 1990, the photo of the Dalai Lama is banned in Tibet. And if you're caught, you have a very, very serious issue with the state. But now this photo circulated that people just worshipping Xi Jinping's portrait instead. And yesterday I saw once with Mao also, and on altar that people, even some photos in Tibet, people prostrating. They are forced to do that. But I don't think that everyone worship Xi Jinping in China today, whether it is in the People's Liberation Army, whether in the army. Xi Jinping has sacked between 100 and 200 major general and above, so I don't think these people are worshipping. Maybe it was for the good reason, maybe some of them were corrupt, we don't know. We don't have access to any records of the courts, of the Chinese court, but also in the government. So many of the party secretary have been sacked. Every day in the newspaper, you say, at least in the Chinese media, you see that one secretary in one county or in one province has been sacked. In Tibet, the executive deputy secretary of Tibet, Ding Yeshang, he disappeared, but I think around 17 or 18 of January. Nobody has mentioned it. It's not come in the Indian press. But I've been trying to follow every day. But that guy was very promising. He was the one raising star in the party. He would have become party secretary in one of the big provinces. Rather young fellow. He was running the show in Tibet, and he has disappeared. Nobody says anything. Nobody. So what I'm saying that in party itself, I'm sure that people are not happy with the emperor. Emperor, I don't know how long his mandate is. He is given himself a mandate for life. It was voted last year by the National People's Congress, by NPC. They voted 99%, but I'm not sure that what has heaven decided, and that is maybe different from what the NPC has decided. So every emperor has fallen. That present emperor will all fall. What I've been feeling depressed for decades, studying this Tibetan issue and seeing no way out. But the fact that today we are speaking, we have discussion like we have now. On different TV channels, you have other discussion. You have a university taking this issue of Tibet. I was so happy when the Indian Army started to study, have a program in Artrak, in the Army Training Command in Shimla, having a Tibetology course for young officers, lieutenant colonel or colonel, to join for 2 years. And it would be part of their training. It would be they would not be penalized for following this course. So to have a Tibetology course is really a big change. Hopefully, many universities also will start having courses. I know some of the Indian university, mostly the private university, have started this or are in the process of starting having Tibetology. I don't agree to the term Tibetology. I think it should be Himalayan and Tibet studies. Himalayan studies are very important because the people on our side of the border have very often the same culture. They are Indian. It proves that Buddhism doesn't belong to China. In Ladakh, they are not at all, and they don't want to be. Same thing in Arunachal, in Tawang, or in Subansari, or in Menchuka, or in Loik sector. People have the culture of Tibet, but they are Indians. And I think something that government could do very easily, the local population in Himalaya have asked the Poti language, which is similar to the Tibetan language, to be included in the 8th schedule of the constitution, to be one more language. I think India should really support the Buddhist population in the Himalaya, because by supporting this local population, they will also strengthen the border. But still, we are living in the era of inner line permit or PAP, protected area permit, which dates from the 19th century, from the British time. So it's high time that the government realize that there is ways to check if some people misbehave, or if some people want to spy or be not sympathetic to India. There are other ways to check than to have an inner line permit. When you have an inner line permit, it means it's not you have a doubt that it's your territory. I don't need an inner line permit to go to Karnataka or to go to Kerala. But why should I need an inner line permit to go to Arunachal Pradesh? So I think these small steps government could take easily. And if China is not happy, fine, it's okay.
How far do you think the demographic project in Tibet is likely to succeed? And do you think India can do anything about it?
Can you type?
Yes. How far do you think the demographic project is likely to succeed
Which
in
project?
Tibet? Demographic.
Demographic.
Yeah.
I think it has succeeded in, already. And there's very few statistics, because if you look at the official China statistics, they say that the Tibetan Autonomous Region, which is about 1/3 of the historical Tibet. You know that in 1965 they divided Tibet in 5 parts. That's a clever move, administrative move. One part has gone to Qinghai province, one in Gansu province, one Sichuan province, one Yunnan, and you have central Tibet, which is the Tibetan Autonomous Region. Now they say that the population is 2.5 millions, more or less what it was. But in their census, they don't give the population of settlers or migrants. They say, no, these people will stay only a few years and go back. So they still come in the census of their native province in the mainland. So it's very difficult to have. Now my main worry is these border villages. They do villages which are totally disproportionate with the local population. Like Yume village, which is north of Takshin in Upper Subansari, that village had 2-3 inhabitants about 10 years ago. In 2017, that village was adopted by Xi Jinping. He wrote a letter to 2 young ladies, shepherds of that village, and he said that you're protecting the border, you're a good Chinese nationalist, and continue to protect this border. Since then, that village has been sort of Xi Jinping's village. Last year, there were 32 inhabitants. This year, there is 300 inhabitants. Now, from where are these people coming? I can see on the Chinese newspaper, very often they speak of some road workers or some people come to build the infrastructure of these villages, have come from the mainland, migrant people, and they have settled and they have married Tibetans. So in few years' time, it has started that the entire border of India, from Denchok in Ladakh to Kibutu in east Arunachal Pradesh, will be have Chinese migrants, because they don't really trust the Tibetans. After 70 years of occupation, they don't trust the Tibetans, because Tibetan, as I mentioned earlier, they have kept their culture intact, though they may be under communist regime, but their love for their leader remains. So that's issue for China. And last 2 weeks, for example, that Metok County, where China is building that 9 hydropower plants, or planning to, as announced they would be building, was sealed to the public. Why? They don't want any people from Tibet, from the Thar, from Lhasa, from north of that county, the bordering India, to come inside, and they don't want people from the border area also to go to Lhasa and eventually send some messages to India. They are so nervous about that. So
Last question. Do you think the ascent of Hindutva will change Indian thinking about Tibet and India's strategic culture generally?
I think historically the BGP and all have always been favoring Tibet. The problem is that when leaders come in the hot seat, sometimes they cannot do what they had said they would do when they were in the opposition. That's a general problem, but we can hope that they have a better understanding, and certainly the strategic culture, they have a better understanding. And now, as I mentioned several times, to do something in Tibet is not, I think one thing that the government and the leadership in India should do, and I'm sure Mr. Modi understands that you should come closer to Taiwan. Taiwan has offered several years ago to have teaching 10,000 Indians Chinese, proper Chinese. Today, for example, in the army, they speak Chinese, which is taught in the language school in Madhya Pradesh. And the joke is that they can only understand each other, but if they go to China, they are not able to fully understand Mandarin. So I think like something like language, that culture should be taken from Taiwan. That is something that the government and the party, the present party in power should really do, because small things like that, it would really change the entire relation with China, and to understand better China, but also to understand better the Tibetan issue. And that so Tibetology or Himalayan and Tibetan studies should really be pushed. And India should not be scared also to say that if on August 29, the Tibetan commandos, the Special Frontier Force, helped India to take that ridge, that Kailash range, should say thank you to this. I think one of the boys have been commended, that's good, but should not, for years, it has changed. I think it has changed because for years, I was always told, don't speak about the SFF. I said, why should I not speak about the SFF? They are in India, they helped India in 71 during the Bangladesh operation. They have helped India in doing Kargil operation in Successor. They've helped India with the Kailash range in this year, in August. So there's no harm, that we should not be afraid of what China is going to say or how China is going to react. I think that way the present government is really a big change.
So thank you, Mr. Arpi. I'm so sorry about my terrible microphone today. So I will invite Rahul to give the vote of thanks.
Good evening, sir. I'd like to thank Mr. Claude Arpi and Professor Suvrajyoti Gupta for taking out time from the valuable schedule and giving us this wonderful lecture. So I found your lecture to be very insightful, and I genuinely appreciate you for taking out time and enlightening us about this topic. We look forward to inviting you again. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the...
We would like to host you in our university.